Welcome to Sleep from History, where we wander softly into the past to find stories that are both calming and profound. Tonight, we step back more than 20,000 years into an Ice Age world where the nights were long, the winds were sharp, and survival was never certain. In that frozen silence, humans and wolves began a strange, tentative dance. Around lonely campfires, their eyes met across the dark, and something new began an entanglement that would shape both species forever. Here's the reality check. You probably wouldn't last a week. The Pleistocene was a world of hunger and danger where food was scarce, and predators circled every camp. For a wolf to linger near humans, or for a human to allow a wolf close, meant stepping into risk. At first, it was not about friendship, but about survival tolerance and chance. And yet, from that fragile beginning, the story of the dog was born. Before we start, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy these sleepy journeys into history. And drop your location and local time in the comments. We're building a gentle map of listeners across the world. Now, let's drift together into the story of wolves becoming dogs, ancient, fragile, and unforgettable. Picture a winter night during the last ice age. The air is sharp with frost, your breath rising in thin clouds as you crouch close to a fire. Around you, a small band of hunter-gatherers huddles together, guarding scraps of roasted meat, warming numb hands, whispering against the endless dark. Beyond the circle of flames lies silence, but not an empty silence. Out there just beyond the reach of light, eyes glitter. Those eyes belong to wolves. They are not rushing in to attack, nor fleeing into the forest. Instead, they linger at the edges, silent, calculating, cautious. For humans, every instinct says danger. For wolves, every instinct says hunger. And yet, night after night, these two species continue circling one another, bound by need. Archaeologists, sifting through sites in what is now the Czech Republic and Russia, have found wolf-like remains not scattered as prey, but clustered near hearths. Bones appear in layers alongside human artifacts, sometimes carefully placed, sometimes even buried. These are not the marks of a typical hunt. They suggest proximity, perhaps even cohabitation, long before anything like domestication was deliberate. Imagine the scene: a pup too young to hunt, drawn by the smell of marrow bones cracking in the fire. A human child, barely older, tossing a scrap when the elders are not watching. The wolf pup edges closer, its ribs sharp beneath its fur, its ears twitching at every spark from the fire. No one calls it a pet. No one yet thinks of friendship. It is survival, mutual and tentative. Here's the paradox. Wolves were apex predators of the Pleistocene. They were stronger, faster, and often in greater numbers than the humans they stalked. But during the harshest winters, even wolves risked starvation. To linger near humans was to risk spears, but it was also a chance at scraps, at warmth, at life. For humans to tolerate a wolf's presence was equally dangerous. A single mistake could mean a child torn apart or food lost. And yet, the evidence suggests that sometimes they allowed it. This was not yet domestication. It was the shadow before dawn. Researchers call it the commensal stage, a time when animals learn to live alongside humans, not through force but through opportunity. Just as raccoons and foxes scavenge in modern cities, wolves may have become quiet visitors in Ice Age camps. But unlike raccoons, these wolves did not remain at the edges forever. In this fragile dance of survival, something was beginning to change. A tolerance here, a gesture of patience there. Perhaps a wolf learned that sitting still, not charging forward, earned a scrap of food. Perhaps a human noticed that the wolves who lingered were not always enemies, not always attackers. Slowly, imperceptibly, the line between wild predator and tolerated guest blurred. The archaeological record cannot tell us the exact moment. It gives us only fragment skulls with unusual shapes, bones near hearths, hints of something more than hunting. But as we piece those fragments together, a picture emerges of nights where humans and wolves watch the same fire from different sides, both deciding wordlessly that it was safer not to fight. And in that silence, a seed was planted, a seed that would grow across thousands of years into companionship. Beneath layers of frozen soil and sediment, archaeologists uncover not only the tools of survival, stone blades, fire-blackened bones, shards of ochre, but also quiet mysteries. Among them are the scattered remains of wolves that do not fit the usual story. They are not butchered for meat. They are not trophies of a hunt. Instead, they rest in places humans once called home, their bones mingled with ash, hearthstones, and human relics. One striking find comes from Przedmosti, in what is now the Czech Republic. Here, more than 20,000 years ago, wolf-like skulls were discovered arranged in unusual ways. Some were whole, some were fragmented, but they bore no sign of mass slaughter. Instead, they seemed intentionally placed, as if marking a boundary or signifying a presence. Were these remains ritual offerings, tokens of respect, or simply remnants of a deeper connection between human and wolf? No one can say for sure. In Russia's Kostyonki region, two bones of canids appear alongside human burials, not scattered randomly, but positioned with care. Some skulls lie near the heads of human skeletons. Others are placed at the edges of what might once have been dwellings. These are not the patterns of predators discarded after a hunt. They speak of something else. Recognition, perhaps, or reverence. Picture it, a hunter dying in the depths of winter, his kin digging through frozen earth to make a grave. Alongside him, they place the skull of a wolf that may have shadowed the camp, a silent guardian or scavenger whose presence became woven into memory. To us, it looks strange. To them, it may have felt necessary, even comforting. And then the burials grow stranger still. Some canid skeletons appear whole, tucked into shallow pits, as though they too deserved rest. The soil around them is sometimes stained with red ochre, the same pigment used in human burials. This is not how prey is treated. This is how companions are remembered. But here's the reality check. We must tread carefully with our imagination. Archaeology gives us fragments, and fragments can mislead. Some scholars argue these bones belonged to wolves hunted for fur or bone tools, their placement simply practical. Others see evidence of early ritual wolves, serving as symbols in myth or magic. And yet the possibility remains that these creatures were more than symbols. They may have been the first non-human beings to be woven into the human story. What would it mean for Ice Age hunters to share their dead with wolves? Perhaps they saw in them a mirror another predator, bound to family, bound to the pack, surviving by cooperation. Perhaps in the harshest winters, wolves and humans shared not only the same prey, but also the same fate. To bury one alongside the other may have been an acknowledgement we are not so different. The remains themselves whisper contradictions. Some skulls are robust and wolfish, others narrower, almost dog-like. The debate still rages. Were these early dogs distinct from their wild kin, or simply wolves shaped by their environment? The truth may be both. The boundary between wolf and dog was never clear. It blurred in firelight, in hunger, in burial pits dusted with ochre. What matters is not when the first dog appeared, but that long before leashes, long before collars, humans were already making space for wolves in their world. Whether as symbols, scavengers, or companions, the evidence is there in bones, carefully placed, in graves, gently filled. And so in the silence of the Ice Age, among frozen rivers and endless snow, a remarkable thing began, the recognition that these creatures were not just predators, not just prey. They were something else, something that stood close enough to be remembered. Imagine the rhythm of Ice-Age campfires, smoldering low at dawn, hunters setting out across frozen plains, children huddling near embers and scraps of marrow or sinew discarded at the edge of the circle. These scraps did not go unnoticed. From the tree line, paws patted softly. From the ridge shapes drifted closer. Wolves had always been near humans, but at some point, some chose not to attack or retreat. They chose instead to linger. This is what scientists call the camp follower model. The idea that the first step toward domestication was not capture, but curiosity. Certain wolves, perhaps those less aggressive, dared to scavenge near human settlements. At first, they would have been met with stones, shouts, or spears, but the ones that learned to approach carefully, to wait patiently, were sometimes tolerated. And tolerance in such a brutal world was a rare and precious thing. Think of the calculation on both sides. For the wolves approach too boldly and risk death, stay too far and starve. For the humans, drive them all away and lose a potential warning system or cleaner of scraps, allow a few to stay, and perhaps reduce nightly threats. In that tense balance, survival itself became the bargain. Modern parallels remind us that this process is not unique. In today's cities, foxes lurk near trash bins, raccoons raid gardens, crows gather around human waste. These animals adapt to our presence without invitation. But unlike foxes or crows, the wolves of the Ice Age faced far harsher conditions. No fences, no villages, no endless garbage heaps, only scattered bands of humans and the danger of open tundra. For a wolf to survive by following humans, it needed more than boldness. It needed restraint, and restraint is the seed of trust. The wolves that lingered quietly, that did not rush, that learned to wait, passed down those tendencies to their pups. Over generations, such behavior may have become inherited. Little by little, a lineage of wolves emerged that could stand closer to the fire, that could eat what humans left behind, that could sleep near the edges of camp without triggering fear. But the story is not one of steady progress. The archaeological record suggests that domestication was a mosaic flickering in and out across different regions. In some places, wolves may have integrated more deeply. In others, the bond never formed. A harsh winter might drive cooperation, while a sudden scarcity of prey could dissolve it overnight. There was no single first dog. There were many beginnings, many endings across thousands of years. Picture a camp in Russia's steppe during the coldest centuries of the Ice Age. The wind howls across empty plains. The mammoths are scarce, the reindeer herds thin. Near the humans, a wolf huddles against the snowdrift, not within the fire's warmth, but close enough to smell the smoke. Its ribs show through its coat. A child watches it from the firelight, clutching a bone. The elders mutter caution, but the child tosses the bone anyway. The wolf takes it, not with a snarl, but with a wary silence. The moment passes, but something new has begun. This fragile pattern may have repeated countless times in countless camps, and each time it did, the line between stranger and companion blurred a little more. Domestication was not yet written in bone or genome, but in gestures, scraps tossed, growls withheld, nights endured together. The wolves that lingered became shadows of the camp, neither fully wild nor truly tamed, and those shadows, patient and persistent, would one day step closer still. In the slow rhythm of the Ice Age, nothing changed overnight. There were no sudden leaps from predator to partner, no single wolf who became the first dog. Instead, there were countless nights, countless fires, and countless small decisions, some human, some wolf, that together planted the seed of a bond. Archaeologists remind us how fragile this process must have been. Many early encounters surely ended in blood. A hungry wolf lunges too close, and spears fly. A human camp weakened by famine cannot spare food, and the scavenger pack is driven off. But sometimes, just often enough, tolerance outweighed hostility, and those rare moments repeated across centuries began to matter. The evidence is quiet but powerful. In scattered sites, wolf bones rest not in piles of discarded refuse, but in places of significance, near hearths, near human remains, in contexts that suggest more than chance. Some skulls show shapes slightly altered, from their wild kin shorter snouts, wider jaws, subtle changes hinting at adaptation, whether from diet environment or the earliest whispers of selective pressure. The result was the same creatures who were no longer entirely wolf. Think of what that must have looked like in life. At first, perhaps a shadow hovering on the edge of the fire, then a pup bold enough to sit a little closer, ears twitching at the crackle of wood. A child stretches out a wand. Not to petting was not yet imagined, but to toss a scrap. The pup takes it and does not bite. The humans notice. The wolf pup learns. It was not affection yet. It was calculation. But calculation can soften into familiarity, and familiarity into something more enduring. Over generations, the wolves who endured by restraint, by quiet patience, by learning to read the strange, upright apes, passed those traits to their offspring, and humans, though wary, began to see these creatures not only as rivals, but as potential allies. The idea of companionship as we know it, dogs resting at our feet, running at our side, was far in the future. But the foundation was here. A silent pact, born of survival. You stay near us, without harm, and we will not drive you away. That was enough to begin. Scholars sometimes debate whether humans tamed wolves or whether wolves domesticated themselves. The truth may be somewhere in between. Humans did not set out with breeding programs or deliberate plans. Wolves were not passive recipients of human generosity. Instead, Both species bent slightly, meeting in the middle, each adjusting, each changing, and in that slow, unspoken negotiation, a bond began to take root. Picture one last scene before we leave this chapter: the fire burning, low embers glowing against the snow. A human stirs, glances into the dark. There, lying just beyond the circle of warmth, a wolf rests, not prowling, not attacking, simply watching. For the first time, the human does not raise a weapon. For the first time, the wolf does not bare its teeth. In that fragile stillness, the seed of partnership is planted. It would take thousands of years to grow. It would flicker, falter, and nearly vanish in places. But it had begun. And from this quiet beginning, humans would one day walk the earth, not alone, but with dogs at their side. The past does not speak in clear voices. It whispers in fragments: a jawbone, a skull, a scattering of teeth, weathered by centuries underground. From these, archaeologists must build stories, and yet the stories are slippery. When a wolf's bones are found near a human camp, was it prey? Was it scavenger? Was it something more? The truth is rarely certain. One of the greatest puzzles of early domestication lies in the bones themselves. Skulls unearthed from Ice Age sites show curious variations. Some are broad and massive, the mark of true wolves. Others are narrower, with shorter snout shapes that seem closer to what we would call a dog. But here's the dilemma: skull shape can change without domestication. A wolf raised on different food or shaped by a different environment may look dog-like without being a dog at all. Take, for instance, remains from Goyet Cave in Belgium, nearly 30,000 years old. To some researchers, the skulls suggest a distinct lineage, wolves already diverging toward doghood. To others, they are merely wolves altered by diet or circumstance. Which is it? A proto-dog born of human proximity, or just a wolf that lived differently? The answer remains uncertain. This uncertainty is the heart of the problem. Domestication is not a single event, not a moment stamped in time. It is a spectrum. On one end, the wild wolf, fierce, independent, untamed. On the other, the dog as we know it, pliant, social, bound to human life. But in between lies a vast and shifting middle ground, where bones alone cannot tell us the whole story. Archaeologists argue over tooth wear. Did the animal gnaw on softer food because it scavenged human scraps? Or was it simply old, its teeth worn by years of chewing sinew? They study mandibles for butchering marks. Do these show killing for meat, or ritual cutting, or something else entirely? Each fragment is evidence, but none is conclusive. Imagine being one of those early scientists crouched over a frost-bitten excavation trench, lifting a fragile skull into the light. You brush away soil, trace the lines of bone with gloved hands, and ask, is this a wolf or the first whisper of a dog? The skull will not answer. It cannot tell you if it once lingered near human fires, if it once carried scraps in its jaws, if it once slept just beyond the edge of a hearth. It only offers silence. And so debates echo across decades. Some claim domestication began as early as 30,000 years ago. Others insist it was far later, no earlier than 15,000. The bones do not settle the matter. They only remind us of how gradual, how tangled this process truly was. Here's the reality check. The neat categories we like, wolf versus dog, wild versus tame, did not exist for our ancestors. They lived among shades of gray, An animal might be dangerous one night and tolerated the next. A pup might be raised near humans only to run wild when grown. A wolf may look dog-like, yet never have shared a camp. To them, these creatures were not specimens or categories. They were living presences, unpredictable and real. The challenge of telling wolves from proto-dogs is less about bones than about perspective. We want a moment of origin, a line we can draw in the sand. But history does not work that way. Domestication was not a single spark. It was a fire built slowly branch by branch across continents. And in its early glow, wolf and dog were still nearly the same. In museums and laboratories, rows of ancient skulls line the shelves. At first glance, they all seem similar. Long jaw, sharp teeth wide, zygomatic arches built for biting through bone. But on closer inspection, subtle differences emerge. Some jaws curve shorter, some muzzles appear narrower, some teeth seem less imposing. To the untrained eye, these might mean nothing. To scientists, they raise a profound question. Are these the first hints of domestication or simply natural variation? One of the clearest patterns noticed in early finds is skull shortening. True wolves tend to have long, powerful snouts, yet several Ice Age specimens appear foreshortened, their faces subtly compressed. At Goyet in Belgium, at Eliseevici in Russia, and elsewhere across Europe, these traits appear sporadically. To some, this is evidence that humans had already begun to influence wolf populations, perhaps favoring the more docile animals that stayed near camp. To others, it is nothing more than the result of diet and climate. Here's why it matters. Skull shape is malleable. In living wolves, populations feeding primarily on large game like bison develop stronger jaws, while those relying on smaller prey show lighter features. A shift in prey availability, not human interference, could explain the same skeletal changes. This means the line between proto-dog and wolf is blurred, not just in behavior, but etched into bone itself. The theories have shifted as often as the bones have been re-examined. Early in the 20th century, many scholars argued for a single dramatic domestication event, a group of hunters taming wolf pups, beginning the dog line in one place. But as more skulls emerged from the earth, scattered across different regions and timelines, the picture became messier. Some skulls seemed dog-like 30,000 years ago, long before consistent evidence of domestication. Others remained wolf-like even when buried in human contexts. This led to a new idea. Perhaps there was no first dog. Instead, there were many experiments, many starts and stops. Wolves lingered near humans in Belgium, Russia, Siberia, and beyond. Some groups of humans may have tolerated them. Others may have driven them away. In some regions, the bond may have lasted centuries before collapsing. In others, it may never have begun. Domestication, then, was not a line, it was a mosaic, a patchwork of attempts across space and time. Picture a scientist holding two skulls side by side. One is massive, heavy-jawed, unmistakably wolf. The other is slightly smaller, its snout shorter, its teeth more crowded. At first, the difference seems clear, but then the scientist measures another and another, and the line between categories blurs. The dog-like skull might simply be a young wolf, The wolf-like skull might belong to a wolf that lived in harsher terrain. The neat divide collapses, replaced by a spectrum that refuses to fit into tidy labels. For us today, the difficulty is more than academic. The way we interpret these bones shapes how we imagine our own history. Did humans deliberately guide wolves into becoming dogs? Or did wolves adapt themselves by choice? Was there a first dog that slept by the fire? Or were there countless almost dogs living in between categories? The bones whisper many stories, but they will not give us certainty. Here's the reality check. Evolution does not care for human clarity. It unfolds in fits and starts, in overlapping waves, in subtle shifts that blur into one another. What we call dog was not born in a single camp or a single century. It was sculpted across millennia, sometimes visible in bone, sometimes invisible in behavior, always moving between categories. And so each skull unearthed is not just a puzzle piece, it is a reminder that domestication was not a moment but a movement, and that in the long shadows of the Ice Age, wolf and dog were not separate, they were becoming together. Not every path leads forward. In the long winding story of wolves becoming dogs, there were many beginnings that did not last, false starts that flickered out before leaving descendants in the world we know today. Archaeology hints at these vanished lineages, ghostly populations that brushed against humanity but never crossed fully into domestication. Consider Goyet Cave in Belgium. Skulls from nearly 30,000 years ago show features that some describe as dog-like shortened snouts, narrower jaws, cranial proportions unlike typical wolves. If these creatures were the first dogs, their lineage should echo in modern breeds. And yet, their genetic fingerprints are absent. They left no living descendants. Whatever bond they formed with humans, it did not endure. Far to the east, at sites like Eliseevici and Predmosti, similar puzzles appear. Bones that seem distinct from the wolf remain, suggesting populations that lingered near humans. But again, the trail goes cold. Genetic studies reveal that these lineages did not survive. They were experiments written in bone, erased by time. Why? The reasons are unknowable, but easy to imagine. Climate shifts may have ended fragile cooperation. Human migrations may have left these animals behind. Wolves themselves may have reclaimed their wildness, retreating into forests and steppes when circumstances changed. The Ice Age was unforgiving relationships, and that could not endure were ground away like footprints in snow. These lost lineages remind us that domestication was not inevitable. It was fragile, contingent, always at risk of unraveling. For every camp where a wolf pup was tolerated, another drove them off. For every bond that deepened, others dissolved into bloodshed or indifference. What we think of as the smooth road to the dog was instead a maze of branching trails, most of which ended in silence. And yet those false starts matter. Each represents a window into possibility, a place where wolves and humans touched across the divide of species. Even if the line did not last, the experiment left its mark. We see it in bones with unusual wear in jaws, subtly reshaped in the archaeological echoes of creatures that stood halfway between categories. Picture it, a band of humans in Belgium gathering around the mouth of a cave. Nearby, a few wolf-like animals linger, scavenging marrow bones tolerated for a time. Children may have played with their pups, laughing as they tugged at scraps, but then the seasons turned cruel. Herds shifted winters, deepened famine set in. The tolerance collapsed. Those wolves vanished from the human record, their bones buried, their lineage lost. Centuries later, in another region, the same pattern may have begun again. Wolves crept closer, humans hesitated, and for a time another bond flickered. Only a few of these experiments survived long enough to shape the dogs we know today. Here's the reality check. When we look back, it is tempting to imagine a neat, heroic tale. One fire, one wolf, one first dog. But the truth is more haunting. Most of the earliest proto-dogs are gone erased before history began. Their bones remain, but their bloodlines do not. The dog as we know it is the survivor not of one path, but of many attempts, most of which ended. Domestication, then, is not a straight line, but a tapestry woven from threads, many of which snapped before the weaving was done. The dogs we know today carry only a fraction of the stories that once unfolded. The rest lie in caves, in buried layers of soil, in skulls that remind us how much was lost. And yet, in those forgotten lineages, there is beauty. They show us that humans and wolves met many times, in many places, long before the bond became lasting. Each false start was a rehearsal, each lost lineage a shadow of the companionship to come. When we picture domestication, it is tempting to imagine a single place, a single campfire where everything began. One moment in history when a wolf crossed the boundary and became something new. But the evidence tells a different story. What we see instead is a mosaic, a pattern scattered across time and space, many small pieces forming a whole too vast for any one sight to explain. Archaeologists describe it as a patchwork of interactions. In Belgium, we find skulls that seem dog-like, but leave no descendants. In Siberia, bones appear near human camps, suggesting coexistence, but not certainty. In Central Europe, burials mingle wolves and humans in ways that blur symbolism and companionship. Each fragment is incomplete, yet together they form a picture of a process happening not once, but many times. Imagine the Ice Age world as a vast canvas stretching from the frozen tundra of Siberia to the forests of Western Europe. Across this landscape, scattered groups of humans moved, with the seasons following herds seeking shelter. Wherever they went, wolves were there too, tracking prey, shadowing camps, testing boundaries. In some places, the two species clashed. In others, they coexisted, if only briefly, and in a few rare cases, they began to entwine. The mosaic is not just geographic, but behavioral. Some wolves may have followed humans for scraps. Others may have acted as sentinels, their presence warning of predators. A few may even have joined in the hunt-chasing game alongside humans, without being commanded, simply because their survival aligned. Each role was different, each relationship unique. There was no single blueprint for the wolf-dog bond. This is why bones alone cannot settle the debate. A skull might look dog-like, but without context, we cannot know if it guarded a camp or merely scavenged. A burial might suggest reverence, but it could also be ritual symbolism. What matters more than any one piece of evidence is the pattern, the repeated, scattered, persistent signs that humans and wolves were meeting in ways that mattered. Here's the reality check. Domestication was not a project. It was not something humans set out to do, nor something wolves submitted to. It was an accident of survival repeated enough times to become lasting. The mosaic reminds us that the dog we know today is not the product of one origin story, but the survivor of countless encounters, many of which ended in silence. Think of it like river channels on a floodplain. Water flows in many directions, some streams drying out, others deepening into rivers. In the end, only a few carve paths that last, but every channel mattered in shaping the landscape. The domestication of dogs was just such a flood. Many channels, many experiments, most lost, but together, forming the path we now see. For our ancestors, there was no need to name it, no awareness of the transformation underway. They were simply living, struggling through winters, fighting hunger, sharing firelight. Yet in those simple acts, something monumental began. Wolves who lingered became tolerated. Pups who survived near humans became different from their wild kin. Humans who once raised weapons began slowly to lower them. By the end of this long and uncertain process, something new had emerged. Not fully wolf, not yet the dogs we know, but creatures in between. And though their bones may puzzle us, their presence shaped the course of human history. The mosaic is still unfinished. Even today, scientists debate when and where the transformation truly solidified. But perhaps that is the point. Domestication was never about one place, one time. It was about countless fires, countless nights, and countless choices stitched together into a story far larger than any single beginning. Picture again the ice, age step, an open expanse of snow, wind-spiting herds of reindeer and mammoth roaming in dwindling numbers. For both humans and wolves, survival here was a daily gamble. Every hunt risked injury. Every failed chase meant hunger. In such a world, even enemies might find reason to draw near. For wolves, approaching a human camp was perilous. Humans carried fire and spears, and they defended their food fiercely. But those scraps at the camp's edge, marrow bones, sinew, skin, were life itself in the bitter cold. Only the boldest wolves tried to steal them, and among those bold few, only the careful survived. A wolf that lunged recklessly might be killed. A wolf that lingered patiently, waiting for an opportunity, might live to return. Here lies the paradox. The wolves that dared to approach humans were not the fiercest, but the most restrained. They were the ones willing to hold back aggression, to suppress instinct, just enough to survive near the strange, upright hunters. Over generations, such behavior would matter far more than size or speed. It was the wolves that could control themselves, that could tolerate proximity, that found a new niche. For humans, too, the calculation was complex. A wolf prowling close was a threat, but a wolf that scavenged quietly at the margins could serve a function. Its presence might keep away larger predators. Its watchful eyes might sense danger before humans did. Even if they didn't yet call them allies, early humans may have begun to see certain wolves as something more than rivals. This fragile arrangement was not trust, not yet. It was necessity. In times of plenty, humans might drive all wolves away. But in the desperate winters, when survival hung by a thread, they might tolerate those that came close. And slowly, tolerance bred familiarity. Archaeologists call this the self-domestication model. Unlike animals captured and bred deliberately, wolves may have domesticated themselves by choosing to live near humans. Just as pigeons flock in cities today, or foxes prowl the suburbs, wolves that could endure human presence gained an advantage. The humans did not have to tame them. The wolves did the taming themselves of their instincts, their aggression, their fear. Here's the reality check. This was no easy path. Most wolves did not survive it. Only a tiny fraction were able to thread the needle between fear and boldness, danger and opportunity. Those who did left more offspring, and slowly, imperceptibly, their descendants inherited the temperament that allowed them to linger closer still. Imagine the scene of fire crackling, low snow drifting outside the circle of warmth. A wolf waits its paws, pressed into the frost, its eyes fixed on the bones, tossed aside by hunters. It does not rush. It does not snarl. It waits. A child bored by the quiet tosses a scrap further than intended. The wolf seizes it, then retreats. No violence, no blood, only a moment of shared survival. That moment mattered. Across centuries, repeated countless times, it reshaped a species, not in an instant, not by design, but by patience, by caution, by the strange advantage of self-restraint. This was the beginning of self-domestication, not a leash, not a cage, just the quiet decision on both sides to risk being near. And in the heart of the Ice Age, that risk was everything. Survival in the Ice Age was not about strength alone. It was about traits that lasted, habits passed from parent to pup, behaviors that shaped generations. For wolves who lingered near human camps, tolerance was not just a choice. It became an advantage. And in the slow rhythm of evolution, advantage becomes inheritance. Picture a litter of wolf pups born in the lee of a frozen ridge. Their mother has learned carefully to circle close to human camps, scavenging scraps and bones. She is not tame, not friendly, but she is cautious and patient. Her pups too inherit more than her milk. They inherit her temperament, the wariness tempered by boldness, the instinct to approach without attacking. Those pups that carry this balance are more likely to survive, more likely to pass it on. Here is where natural selection does its quiet work. Wolves that stayed too wild, too aggressive, too fearful, died at the edge of spears. Wolves that stayed too distant starved in the frozen dark. But those rare ones that lingered close, yet calmly found food, shelter, and a measure of safety. Their survival was not chance. It was shaped by the choices of humans, sometimes deliberately, sometimes without intent. By sparing a wolf that was less threatening, by allowing pups to linger near camp, humans themselves became unwitting agents of selection. Over time, the line blurred. Each generation of tolerant wolves became slightly different from their wilder kin. Their skulls perhaps shifted subtly, their teeth wore differently, their behavior bent toward proximity. These changes were not sudden, but they accumulated. 1,000 small inheritances woven together created creatures that were no longer fully wolf, though not yet dog. Think of it as a slow spiral. Every season, the wolves closest to humans survived longer. Every generation, their pups carried more of that tolerance. Every century, the difference widened until what had once been a chance encounter became a pattern, and what had been a pattern became a lineage. The most haunting truth is that this process required no plan, No hunter needed to say, "Let us breed wolves." No shaman needed to envision a new species. It happened quietly, invisibly, simply because survival favored it. The wolves domesticated themselves by evolving in response to us. Here's the reality check. This was not kindness, not yet. It was not affection in the way we imagine today. It was survival, raw, unforgiving, accidental. The wolves that stayed near humans endured, not because humans loved them, but because the arrangement worked. And yet, from that arrangement, something remarkable began to grow. Imagine a scene many winters later. Around a human camp, half-grown pups, descendants of scavenger wolves, skulk at the edge of Firelight. They no longer bolt at every shout. They no longer bare their teeth at every approach. They linger tails low, but not bristling, their presence tolerated, even expected. The humans, too, have changed. They notice which animals stay calm, which pups return, which shadows circle without threat. Perhaps they toss scraps deliberately now, not just by accident. Perhaps they even smile at the sight of a pup chewing quietly instead of snarling. This is inheritance in motion, not just of genes, but of habits, of tolerance, of a fragile, growing bond. And over centuries, it carved a path no one could have predicted, wolves slowly becoming something new. It is easy to forget how radical this was. No other large carnivore has walked this path. Lions, leopards, bears all remain wild, but wolves bent toward us, and we bent toward them, until the edge between species softened. By the time this process had unfolded for thousands of years, there were no longer only wolves. There were creatures in between proto-dogs, shadows of the future. They did not yet curl at our feet. They did not yet guard our homes. But they lingered close, and their very presence told the story. Survival had become inheritance, and inheritance had become change. The Ice Age was not kind to either species. Humans lived in small, scattered bands, always on the move, always hungry. Wolves fared little better, chasing herds that sometimes vanished into the horizon, forced to roam further each season. Both were predators, both competitors, but also unknowingly, both potential allies. For the wolves, the benefit of following humans was simple food. A carcass left half-picked bones, rich with marrow scraps of hide and sinew. These were treasures in a frozen world where every calorie counted. A wolf, bold enough to scavenge near human camps, could survive leaner winters than one that hunted alone. The risk of spears was real, but the reward outweighed it. For humans, the benefit was subtler, but just as real. Wolves lingering on the edge of camp became an alarm system. Their keen noses and ears caught movement in the night long before human senses did. A growl in the dark could mean predators nearby. Even if not invited, their presence could keep danger at bay. Over time, hunters may have noticed something else. These camp-following wolves were competitors. Yes, but they were also capable. They tracked game. They sensed prey they could pursue across terrain in ways humans alone could not. Imagine a hunting party moving across the snowy steppe, following faint tracks of reindeer. Nearby, a small group of wolves shadows them, not attacking, not fleeing, simply moving in parallel. Perhaps they are waiting for scraps, but perhaps in moments of chance, they help flush prey from hiding their chase, aligning with human spears. The humans eat, the wolves eat. Survival is shared. This accidental cooperation may have repeated countless times. At first, neither side intended it. Wolves chased because they were hungry. Humans tolerated them because they offered warning. But slowly, patterns became habits. Wolves that lingered were noticed. Pups that returned were spared. A cautious balance of mutual benefit emerged. Here's the reality check. This was not friendship, not yet. Wolves were not pets. Humans were not masters. Each side remained dangerous to the other. But in the harshest winters, both learned that proximity could mean survival, and survival has a way of rewriting instincts. The benefits extended beyond the hunt. A wolf carcass, squenched by humans, might offer fur and bone tools. A wolf lingering near camp might clean refuse that would otherwise draw larger predators. Even without affection, their role began to shift from enemy to tolerated neighbor, from competitor to something more. Picture a camp in deep winter. The fire crackles weakly. Food is scarce. The wind howls against the hides that shelter the people. Outside, a wolf lies curled in the snowdrift, close enough to smell the smoke, far enough not to be chased away. Its breath frosts in the air, its body rising and falling in sleep. The humans glance at it, but do not raise weapons. In their silence, a small exchange takes place. We will not harm you tonight, and you will not harm us. That was enough to tip the scales of survival. Over generations, these exchanges became more common. The wolves that survived by staying near humans lived longer, bred more, and passed on their wary tolerance. The humans that endured the winters with wolves nearby gained warning scavengers, and perhaps at times helpers. Each side benefited even if neither fully understood. And from this fragile balance, something new began to take root. Not yet loyalty, not yet companionship, but a mutual thread of survival. It was not love that began the story of dogs. It was hunger, and hunger shared long enough became the foundation of trust. Step by step, season by season, the relationship between humans and wolves edged closer. At first, it was scavenging, the quiet rustle of paws at the edge of a camp, the gleam of eyes waiting for bones. Then, it became something more, a pattern that began to repeat, a closeness that grew harder to dismiss as coincidence. The wolves that lingered were not simply passers-by. They were becoming part of the human world. Archaeologists describe this stage as the threshold of partnership, not domestication as we imagine it. No collars, no names, no clear ownership, but a subtle shift in roles. Wolves no longer lived only as predators of the steppe. Some lived in the shadow of human fire, their survival bound to the scraps and tolerance of our species. Humans too began to notice which wolves returned, which pups grew calmer with time. These were not random encounters anymore. They were the first threads of a relationship that would change history. Imagine a scene: a group of hunters returns with a reindeer carcass, dragging it across snow. From the tree line, wolves watch, hungry but cautious. Instead of attacking, they follow. As the carcass is butchered, scraps are tossed aside. The wolves take them, retreat, then return the next night. Over time, the humans recognize them, not as individuals perhaps, but as a familiar presence. They become the camp wolves' shadows that are expected, tolerated, and eventually accepted. What makes this remarkable is that it required changes on both sides. Wolves had to quiet their instincts to learn patience instead of aggression. Humans had to overcome fear to see potential where once there was only danger. Slowly, behavior bent toward coexistence, and in bending, both species began to change. Here's the reality check. This was still a fragile arrangement. Wolves were not yet dogs. They could turn on humans, raid camps, kill livestock. Once domestication began in later eras, humans too might kill wolves if hunger left no choice. But across generations, these fragile truces multiplied. The wolves that survived longest were those that adapted best to human proximity. The humans who endured the harshest winters often did so with wolves circling nearby. Each side gained, each side shifted. It was not a leap, but a slow weaving. Wolves became more than scavengers. They became watchful guardians at the edge of light. Humans became more than hunters. They became partners in a silent pact of survival. Neither fully planned it, but both participated in it. And in that participation, a new kind of animal began to emerge. Not fully wolf, not yet the companion curled on our hearths, but something in between the proto-dog. Picture one last moment before we leave this chapter. A child lies half asleep beside a dying fire. Outside in the snow, a wolf curls against the cold, its ears flicking at every sound. A distant howl rises, and the wolf's body stiffens. The humans stir, alerted not by their own senses, but by the vigilance of the creature at their camp's edge. For the first time, danger is shared. For the first time, survival has a sentinel beyond human kin. That is the beginning of partnership. It was not written in contracts or planned in strategy. It was written in hunger and patience, in firelight. And from that quiet beginning, wolves and humans stepped together into a shared future, one that would reshape both forever. If bones are whispers, then DNA is an echo carried across millennia. It tells us what the earth cannot, the hidden story written in bloodlines. And when scientists began to read the ancient genomes of wolves and dogs, they discovered something startling. The boundary between wolf and dog was never clean. Instead, it was a tangle of overlaps, crossings, and minglings. A blurred line that defies any simple origin. Modern genetic studies show that early dogs did not diverge neatly from wolves and then march forward on their own path. Instead, they interbred repeatedly with wild wolf populations. The two groups mingled again and again, exchanging genes across centuries. What this means is that dogs and wolves were not separate species in the way we imagine today. They were porous populations, their blood mixing and separating in cycles. Here's the reality check. There was no sudden cut, no clear family tree with one branch labeled wolf and another labeled dog. It was more like a braid strands, weaving together, fraying, rejoining, creating patterns difficult to untangle. Some early dog lineages may have almost vanished into wolf populations, their genetic traces diluted beyond recognition. Others may have absorbed wolf genes again and again, reshaping themselves along the way. Consider the puzzle this presents to scientists. The archaeological record might show bones with dog-like traits, but the DNA within tells of wolf ancestry. Other bones look wolfish, but contain the fingerprints of early dog genomes. Each discovery complicates the story. Where does one species end and the other begin? Perhaps they never truly did. This genetic entanglement is not surprising when you imagine the lives of humans and wolves during the late Ice Age. Camps were small, scattered, and mobile. Wolves still roamed freely. Even if some pups grew up near humans, nothing prevented them from breeding with wild packs nearby. Likewise, wolves tolerated near humans might mate back into the wild. The result, a constant exchange of bloodlines, blurring any boundary between domesticated and wild. Imagine a camp in the Siberian tundra, a half-grown proto-dog raised near the fires, slips away into the snow. It joins a nearby wolf pack for a season mates and produces pups. Some of those pups linger near the humans again, carrying a mix of traits, part wolf, part dog, part something in between. Over generation, this back and forth repeats until the distinction itself dissolves. Genetics shows us this pattern clearly. Ancient dog genomes reveal traces of wolf DNA, added long after their initial divergence. Modern wolves too carry echoes of ancient dog bloodlines, ghosts of domestication flowing backward into the wild. The two species shaped each other not only through behavior, but through the mingling of their very genes. This is where the story deepens. If dogs carry wolf blood, and wolves carry dog blood, then perhaps the very idea of a first dog is flawed. Perhaps instead of a single ancestor, there were many populations wolves, half domesticated, dogs, half wild, their genomes crisscrossing until only shadows remained. It is a humbling reminder of how messy evolution truly is. We like to draw straight lines, but nature writes in spirals. The history of dogs and wolves is not a clean break. It is a blur, an entanglement, a story told in half-shared genes and mingled bloodlines. And yet, within that blur, something remarkable took hold. The bond between humans and these canids endured, even if the boundaries of species did not. The blurred lines were not a weakness. They were the bridge that allowed domestication to survive. As scientists unraveled the threads of dog and wolf DNA, a strange puzzle appeared. Modern wolves are not the ancestors of dogs. Their genomes do not align. In fact, when researchers compared ancient dog DNA with that of living wolf populations, they found no perfect match. The dogs had come from wolves, yes, but from wolves that no longer exist. This mysterious ancestor has been called the ghost wolf, not a single animal, not a mythical creature, but an entire population of wolves that once roamed the Ice Age world. They were wolves in form, but different in subtle, critical ways. They carried traits that made them more flexible, more tolerant, more willing to coexist with humans. And yet, sometime in the distant past, this lineage vanished. Only its echoes remain hidden in the genomes of the dogs that survived. Here's the reality check. We may never find the bones of these ghost wolves. They may lie undiscovered in frozen soils, or perhaps they disappeared without leaving enough remains for us to trace. Their story is written not in fossils, but in the genetic signatures they left behind, faint fingerprints embedded in every dog alive today. Imagine the scene tens of thousands of years ago. A population of wolves hunts across the northern plains. They are leaner perhaps, or less aggressive than their kin. When food runs short, some begin to linger near human bands, tolerating the strange, upright apes who guard fires against the cold. Unlike other wolves, these tolerate the risk. Unlike other wolves, these survive. Over centuries, their descendants spread across regions where humans moved. Some mingled with wilder packs, their lineage diluted. Others stayed close to humans, reshaping slowly into proto-dogs. And eventually, the ghost wolf itself faded from the earth, leaving behind only its children, the first true dogs. For scientists, this discovery was unsettling. The neat story that dogs descended directly from modern wolves crumbled under the weight of evidence. Instead, it seemed that dogs came from a wolf population that no longer walks the earth, a population erased its identity, known only through the legacy it left in our companions. What does it mean to know your best friend's ancestor is a ghost? It means that dogs are living fossils, carriers of a lineage extinct in the wild, but preserved through their bond with us. Every wagging tail, every soft ear carries the echo of a wolf that no human today has ever seen. The ghost wolf hypothesis changes how we view domestication. It was not simply about taming the wolves we know. It was about encountering a particular population, a branch of the wolf family tree that was uniquely suited to this partnership. Their genes, shaped by temperament, social flexibility, tolerance, made domestication possible. Without them, the story might never have begun. Picture a researcher in a modern lab watching sequences of ancient DNA unravel on a glowing screen. The code spells out an ancestry that leads not to gray wolves pacing the forests today, but to an absence, a vanished population. It is like reading a letter signed by a hand that no longer exists. And so the ghost wolf remains both presence and absence. We cannot point to its skull in a museum. We cannot reconstruct its howl, but we know it walked the same frozen plains as our ancestors, and we know it chose somehow some way to linger near their fires. Without it, there would be no dogs. And without dogs, human history itself might have unfolded differently. Genomes are not static. They flow like rivers, mingling, branching, joining again. When scientists studied the ancient DNA of wolves and dogs, they discovered that domestication was not a clean break, but a swirl of crossings, genes in constant motion. The first proto-dogs did not exist in isolation. Even as they lingered near humans, they continued to interbreed with wild wolves around them. A litter born close to a camp might wander into the forest and mate with wolves. A wolf from the wild might drift toward humans, breeding with proto-dogs at the fire's edge. Each union carried a genetic cargo, back and forth, blurring lines that modern science struggles to separate. This mixing explains one of the puzzles in the record: why some ancient dog bones look wolf-like, and why some wolf bones show traces of dog DNA. The boundaries were porous. Animals moved between worlds, half belonging to both, never fully one or the other. Here's the reality check. If we imagine domestication as a straight line, we are misleading ourselves. It was more like a braided river, channels dividing, merging, spilling into one another. Some branches dried up, leaving ghost lineages. Others carved deeper paths, carrying traits that survive in dogs today. Imagine a camp on the steppe. A proto-dog raised among humans slips into the forest one spring. It meets a wolf mates and raises pups. Some of those pups return to the camp, drawn by the smell of smoke and food. Others remain in the wild. Their genes carry the story of both paths. Thousands of years later, when scientists sequence ancient DNA, the signature of these minglings still lingers. What this means is profound. Early dogs were not pure. They were hybrids, constantly absorbing and releasing wolf blood. And this back and forth may have been critical to their survival. By merging with wolves, proto-dogs retained genetic diversity, strengths needed to endure harsh climates, resist disease, adapt to new prey. Without this merging, the line may have withered. For humans, too, this meant that the dogs they knew were not a single kind of animal. Some camps may have sheltered creatures more wolf-like, strong, wary, only partly tolerant. Others may have lived alongside softer, calmer proto-dogs, the result of generations close to human fires. Across the Ice Age, the range of canids near humans must have been astonishingly diverse, a spectrum stretching from wild wolves to almost dogs, with countless blends in between. The genetic record shows us this dance clearly. In sample after sample, dog DNA reveals wolf ancestry added long after divergence. And in modern wolves, traces of ancient dog genes survive as ghosts. The intermingling was not an exception. It was the rule. Think of it when you look into the eyes of a dog. Today, you are not seeing a single lineage. You are seeing a tapestry woven from thousands of crossings, a story written in genes that flowed back and forth for millennia. That mosaic of mixing is why dogs adapted so quickly to human life, why they spread across continents, why they became something no other predator has achieved a partner to us. The mingling also explains why domestication feels so elusive in the record. There was never a single before and after. There was only a gradient, a slow drift, a blurring. Wolves became dogs, not by a single leap, but by countless crossings until one day the balance tipped. And yet, within that motion, one truth remained. Some animals kept coming back. No matter how many times the line blurred, there were always those who lingered near the fire, who chose proximity over distance. In that choice lay the seed of the bond. Every lineage leaves traces, but not every lineage survives. As the last ice age waned, many wolf populations disappeared, some consumed by climate change, others by competition, others simply lost in the quiet erasure of time. Among these vanished groups may have been the very ancestors of dogs, the ghost wolves, who first lingered by human fires, now gone forever from the wild. Here's the reality check. We cannot find a living wolf today that matches the DNA of dogs. Not in Siberia, not in Europe, not in the Arctic. All the wolves that roam the earth now are close cousins, but not the parents, the true ancestors. The ones that bent toward humans are missing. It is as if the family tree has lost a branch, leaving only its shadow in the genomes of dogs. Why did they vanish? Perhaps they were outcompeted by other wolves. Perhaps their smaller populations, tied to the fate of migrating humans, dwindled when people moved on. Perhaps the very traits that made them suited to coexistence, tolerance, patience, less aggression, made them vulnerable in the brutal wild. We do not know. But whatever the reason, they disappeared, leaving only their descendants beside us. Imagine it tens of thousands of years ago. Ghost wolves range across the frozen steppe. They follow humans at a distance, not as prey, not as predators, but as shadows. Over time, they merge into human life. Some pups raised near fires, some packs lingering around camps. Then, as centuries pass, their wild line fades. The wolves we know today descend from different survivors. The ghost wolf itself vanishes. Only the dogs remain, carrying its memory forward. This realization unsettled scientists. For decades, the assumption had been simple dogs came from wolves, and modern wolves could show us that path. But the genetic record overturned that story. Instead of pointing to any living wolf, it pointed to an absence, a gap, a missing ancestor. The dogs beside us are not direct descendants of gray wolves. They are the children of a vanished branch. It is a haunting thought. The ancestor of your dog's wagging tail and soft eyes no longer exists. We live with its ghost, carried in the fur and bones of animals that chose to stay close to us. Every bark, every nuzzle is an echo of a lineage that the wild world erased, but that humanity preserved. And yet this vanishing is part of what made dogs possible. By binding themselves to humans, ghost wolves left the open steppe behind. Their survival was no longer tied to the wild alone, but to our fires, our scraps, our protection. In that choice, their wild line was absorbed, transformed, and reborn as something new. Think of it like this. When you walk with a dog today, you are walking with a survivor of an extinct population. Their wolf ancestors are gone, but their blood lives on. Without humans, the ghost wolf may have vanished entirely. With humans, it endured in a new form. The vanishing ancestors remind us of the fragility of history. What we take for granted, dogs lying at our feet, their loyalty unquestioned, is the product of chance. Had those ghost wolves not lingered, had they not merged with us, had their line died without connection, there would be no dogs at all. The bond we cherish is built on absence, on a lineage that the world erased, but that survived through us. The ghost wolf is gone, but its spirit walks still in every loyal companion by our side. The bones of wolves and proto-dogs scattered near camps whisper of coexistence. But in some rare places, the earth tells a deeper story, not just of animals living near humans, but of animals buried with them. These burials mark one of the earliest and clearest signs that wolves were becoming something more than scavengers, that they were being woven into the human world. One of the most striking finds comes from Oberkassel, Germany, around 14,000 years ago. Here, archaeologists uncovered the graves of a man and a woman laid carefully in the earth, their bodies dusted with red ochre pigment. But they were not alone. Curled beside them was a dog, its bones showing signs of life and death bound to human care. The dog had suffered from a viral illness, one that in the wild would almost certainly have been fatal. Yet the skeleton shows it lived long enough to heal, suggesting that humans tended to it, nursed it, kept it alive when nature would not have. Here's the reality check. This was not livestock. This was not prey. An animal this sick would have been a liability, not an asset, and yet it was cared for. And when it died, it was buried alongside humans, with ritual pigment scattered across the grave. This was no accident. This was meaning. Across other sites, similar patterns appear. In Russia, in the Middle East, in parts of Europe, canid remains are found placed with human burials or laid to rest on their own. Some are sprinkled with ochre. Some are positioned with care, curled as though sleeping. These were not discarded bones. They were deliberate. They tell us that by this time, wolves turned dogs had entered the symbolic and emotional space of humans. They were no longer just tolerated, they were remembered. Imagine the moment of burial. A small band gathers in silence. The elder lies wrapped in hides. Beside them, The body of a dog, once a pup raised near the fire, once a companion in hunts and nights of hunger. The people sprinkle red ochre, the pigment of blood, and life over both. They fill the grave slowly, carefully, not separating human from animal, but uniting them in death. No one speaks the words. We would use friend, companion, pet, but the gesture is unmistakable. This animal mattered. For archaeologists, these burials are extraordinary because they reveal intent. Scavengers are not buried. Competitors are not laid in ochre. Only beings who had crossed into the human circle, beings whose lives had meaning to the group, are honored this way. The presence of dogs in graves tells us that by this point, humans saw them not only as useful, but as part of their story. And these graves are older than farms, older than herds, older than settled villages, long before domestication of sheep goats or cattle dogs were already being buried with care. That makes them unique. The first animal, not just to live beside us, but to be brought into our rituals of life and death. The Oberkassel dog, with its healed bones and ochre-sprinkled grave, is more than a fossil. It is evidence of attachment, a glimpse into a world where humans, for the first time, looked at an animal and thought, this one is us, this one belongs with us. When archaeologists sift through the layers of ancient soil, they look not only at where bones lie, but at what those bones reveal about life. Sometimes the story is written not in burial pits or pigments, but in scars, healed fractures, worn joints, injuries that should have been fatal in the wild, but were not. These are the signs of care, the fingerprints of a bond between humans and animals long before recorded history. One striking example comes from Bonn Oberkassel in Germany, where the remains of a dog were found alongside human graves. The dog's teeth showed signs of disease, and its skeleton bore the marks of severe illness. In the wild, such conditions would have killed it quickly, yet the animal lived long enough for the bones to heal. Someone fed it, protected it, and ensured its survival through sickness. This was not utility, it was compassion. Other sites across Europe and Siberia reveal similar patterns. Dogs with broken limbs that had set cleanly ribs, fractured but healed jaws, malformed, yet still surviving to adulthood. Each healed wound tells the same story. These animals were not abandoned when injured. They were fed when they could not hunt, sheltered when they could not fend for themselves. In an Ice Age world of scarcity, this was no small sacrifice. Here's the reality check. To keep an injured wolf or proto-dog alive meant giving up food time and safety. Meat was precious. Every scrap mattered. To share it with an animal that could not contribute to the hunt was a choice that carried weight. And yet again and again, humans made that choice. Why? Perhaps these animals had already proven themselves valuable as guardians, hunters, or warning systems. Perhaps they had become companions to children or elders, their presence woven into the rhythm of daily life, or perhaps even without words, for it humans felt the stirrings of something we would recognize as empathy, an understanding that this creature's life mattered beyond its usefulness. Imagine a scene on the tundra. A pup limps back to camp, its leg broken in a chase. In the wild, it would soon die, but a child cries for it, and the elders relent. They splint the leg with a stick. They feed it scraps, they keep it near the fire. Weeks pass. The pup limps, but it lives. Years later, that same animal growls at night, alerting the camp to danger. What began as an act of mercy becomes in time an advantage. The healed bones remind us that domestication was not only about survival strategies, it was also about choices, moments when humans decided to nurture instead of discard, to keep instead of kill. Those moments shaped the relationship as much as hunting or scavenging did. Each scar carried forward into the future, marking not only the body of the animal, but the beginning of a new kind of bond. And these choices ripple through time. The dogs of today, curled at our feet, carry in their lineage the memory of ancestors who survived because humans cared. Every healed rib, every mended limb in the archaeological record is a quiet testimony we chose to protect them, and they chose to stay with us. This is why archaeologists place such weight on signs of healing. They are evidence of more than biology. They are evidence of relationship. They show us that long before collars or leashes, long before farms or herds, humans and proto-dogs were already bound by acts of care. Care in a cruel world is never trivial. It is the seed of attachment. And from those small acts, splinting a leg, sharing scraps, keeping a sick animal alive, grew the companionship that would reshape both species forever. Some of the clearest signs that dogs were more than scavengers or hunters come not from practical remains, but from ritual ones. Across burial sites in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, archaeologists have uncovered dogs laid carefully in ways that echo human traditions. These are not casual discards. They are symbols woven into ceremonies of meaning, suggesting that dogs had crossed into the spiritual world of humans. One remarkable example comes from Ain Malaha, in Israel dating to around 12,000 years ago. Here, archaeologists found the skeleton of a woman buried with her hand resting on the body of a puppy. The gesture is striking: a human and an animal interred together, their bodies arranged in contact as though the bond between them should be preserved in death. This is not how prey is buried. This is how kin is remembered. Other burials show similar care. Dogs placed near the heads of human skeletons as if guarding them. Dogs curled at the entrance of dwellings, perhaps to symbolize protection in the afterlife. Some are covered in ochre, the same pigment used for human dead. These gestures reveal not only attachment, but symbolism. The dog had become more than animal. It had become a spirit companion, a guardian, a symbol of loyalty and passage. Here's the reality check. Humans did not treat every useful animal this way. Cattle, goats, and sheep, domesticated later, were rarely given ritual burials in the same early period. Dogs alone were singled out for this treatment. That distinction speaks volumes. Long before they were herders or guards of flocks, dogs were companions in a deeper sense. Imagine the funeral of a hunter thousands of years ago. The group gathers the body laid out in the pit. Red pigment, sprinkled like bloodstone tools placed as grave goods. And beside the hunter, a doe is placed as well. Perhaps a pup raised by the camp. Perhaps a loyal creature that slept near the fire. As the soil is filled, the two lie together forever, human and dog, sharing the same ritual passage into memory. Why did humans elevate dogs to this role? Part of the answer may lie in the mirror dogs held up to us. Wolves, like humans, lived in packs, hunted cooperatively, guarded their young, mourned their dead. To see those traits in another species was to see a reflection of ourselves. Perhaps dogs were seen as spiritual kin creatures who belonged to the same great order of family and loyalty. Ritual burials suggest more than affection. They suggest belief that dogs held meaning beyond their bodies, that they could guide, protect, or accompany souls into the unknown. Across many cultures, long after domestication, solidified dogs appear in myth as guardians of thresholds, from Anubis of Egypt to Cerberus of Greece to the dogs guarding shamanic underworlds in Siberia. The seeds of these myths may have been planted in the Ice Age, in the earliest burials, where humans laid dogs to rest as companions of the spirit as well as the body. The archaeological record cannot tell us what words were spoken at those burials, what gestures were made, what emotions stirred in the hearts of the living, but the placement of bones tells us enough. These animals mattered in ways that reached beyond survival. They carried symbolism. They carried spirit. Think of it in the cold earth of a Natufian grave. A woman's hand rests forever on a puppy. Thousands of years later, we still understand the gesture without translation. It is the same gesture we make when we reach down to touch a dog today. The same bond, unbroken, still alive. At first, the wolves who lingered near humans offered clear practical benefits. They scavenged refuse, warned of predators, and sometimes joined in the chase of prey. Their role was rooted in survival, but as the centuries passed, the archaeological record reveals a shift. Dogs were not just useful, they were cherished. They were no longer only workers at the margins of human life. They were companions at its center. The evidence is subtle, yet powerful. Graves that place dogs beside humans are not acts of utility. They are acts of meaning. Dogs were not buried to provide food in the afterlife, as livestock sometimes were. They were buried as companions, protectors' kin. This shift tells us that by the time agriculture was still a dream, dogs had already crossed into a category no other animal had reached the realm of emotional attachment. Here's the reality check. In a world of scarcity, where survival consumed every waking moment, it would have been easier to treat dogs as tools or expendable mouths. But humans didn't. They cared for them when they were sick, buried them with ritual pigment, and even placed them in positions of honor beside their dead. That choice, repeated across continents, marks one of the most profound changes in human history. Why did this shift occur? Part of the answer lies in the unique bond dogs offered. Unlike other animals, dogs mirrored human life. They lived in groups, defended their own, raised their young collectively. They recognized hierarchy, just as humans did. These parallels may have made it easier for humans to see dogs not as other, but as kin. And once that leap was made, utility was no longer the only value. Dogs became companions. Imagine a camp at dusk thousands of years ago. Children laugh as a pup tumbles in the snow, its paws too large for its body. An elder sits nearby, stroking the pup's head absent-mindedly while repairing a tool. The hunters glance into the dark, reassured, not only by the crackle of the fire, but by the low growl of a dog at the camp's edge. In this single scene, the roles are clear: playmate, comforter, guardian. Not one role, but many, all woven together. Over time, these roles deepened. Dogs were not just tolerated, they were depended upon. They helped in hunts, they warmed bodies through cold nights, they alerted families to danger. But beyond these tasks, they filled another space emotional presence. Archaeologists may not be able to measure affection directly, but the burials, the healed bones, the deliberate placements tell us it was there. By 10,000 years ago, dogs appear not only in graves, but in art and iconography. Their images are carved into bone, painted on walls, etched into ritual objects. They had become part of human identity, symbols of loyalty and guardianship. They were no longer simply surviving with us, they were part of who we were. And so the role of dogs shifted permanently, from utility to companionship, from scavengers to partners. They crossed a threshold no other animal had crossed. They became entwined with human life, not only for what they offered, but for who they were. Think of it. The earliest dogs were not yet breeds, not yet the animals curled on couches or guarding farms, but they were already something extraordinary creatures who had stepped out of the wild into our lives, filling spaces of survival, spirit, and affection all at once. The archaeological record is clear long before civilization, long before agriculture. The bond was already formed, and it was not built on utility alone. It was built on companionship. Roughly 16,000 years ago, the world was still locked in ice. Vast glaciers gripped much of the northern hemisphere, lowering sea levels and exposing new paths across continents. One such path was Beringia, a wide land bridge that stretched between what is now Siberia and Alaska. This was no narrow crossing, but an expanse of tundra and steppe, rich with grasses and game, and it became the route by which humans first entered the Americas. But they did not walk it alone. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that dogs, or more precisely, proto-dogs, were already traveling with them. These were not yet the breeds we know today, but animals shaped by millennia of coexistence with humans. Their genomes reveal a maternal lineage distinct from modern wolves, suggesting that they were already something new. By the time the first humans crossed into the New World, dogs were already at their side. Here's the reality check. This was not a march of domesticated pets. These were still rugged, wolf-like creatures surviving in one of the harshest climates on Earth. They were not carried as luxuries. They endured because they were useful. Their endurance, their ability to track game, to guard camps, to provide warmth in bitter cold, made them indispensable partners for the long migration. Imagine the crossing, a caravan of small human groups wrapped in hides, dragging sleds of belongings. The nights are endless, the wind merciless. Alongside them, dogs lope through the snow, paws pressing into ice, breath steaming in the cold. When danger stirs, perhaps a shadow of another predator, the dogs growl first, warning their human companions. When prey is spotted, they dart ahead, their chase aligning with the hunter's spears. And at night, they curl against human bodies, warmth shared beneath the starlit sky. The genetic record confirms this partnership. Ancient dog day from early American sites shows clear continuity with Siberian proto-dogs, not with later European arrivals. This means the first dogs of the Americas were not afterthoughts, but pioneers. They crossed with humans, adapting to new lands, forming lineages that thrived for millennia before vanishing in later waves of colonization. What is most remarkable is that this journey likely happened more than once. Human groups did not pour across Beringia in a single migration. They trickled wave by wave across centuries, and with each wave, dogs padded close behind. Sometimes they may have mingled, sometimes they may have perished, But always in the surviving record, they are present. Dogs were not passengers, they were pathfinders. They scouted ahead, sniffed out danger, chased prey, and gave early warning. Without them, the crossing might have been harsher, the survival of small groups even more fragile. In this sense, the dogs were not just companions. They were part of the migration itself, shaping the success of the journey. Picture one more scene before we leave Beringia. The sun hangs low, pale light, stretching across the tundra. A human family huddles against the cold fire, sputtering in the wind. Beside them lies a dog, ribs visible, but tail curled against the child's feet. Both are exhausted, both hungry, but both endure together. The land bridge will not last. The glaciers will melt, the seas will rise, and Beringia will vanish beneath the waves. But the bond that crossed it will remain. And so when humans first stepped into the Americas, dogs stepped with them. A partnership forged in the old world walked boldly into the new. The spread of dogs did not stop with land bridges. As humans reached the coastlines of new continents, dogs followed and sometimes even arrived before livestock or crops. The archaeological record is full of surprises, dog bones found on islands where humans had only just begun to settle their presence. A quiet testimony that wherever we went, they came too. Consider the Channel Islands off California's coast. Beneath layers of sand and shell, archaeologists uncovered dog remains dating back thousands of years. These dogs were not wild wolves that swam across the sea. They were brought deliberately by people. To cross by boat with a kung meant making a choice. This animal mattered enough to carry across waters. Similar finds emerge in the Arctic. On fog-shrouded isles, bones of dogs appear alongside human camps, showing that they endured in some of the harshest climates on Earth. In Japan, Scandinavia, and the Mediterranean, early island sites reveal the same pattern. Dogs arrived almost as soon as humans did. They were part of the voyage companions in exploration. Here's the reality check. Dogs were not always the strongest or the most practical cargo. Carrying a dog across the sea meant fewer supplies or tools, and yet time and again, people chose to bring them. That choice speaks to something more than utility. It points to attachment, loyalty, and recognition that dogs were not just followers, but partners. Imagine an ancient canoe gliding over black water waves, lapping at the sides. A handful of people crouch inside bundles of food and tools piled around them. At the bow, a dog sits, alert ears, pricked nose, lifted to the salt air. It does not row. It does not carry supplies yet. It is here, trusted enough to make the crossing. When the canoe scrapes onto the shore of a new island, the dog leaps out first, sniffing the air, ready to explore. Humans follow, but the bond between them has already arrived. Genetic evidence supports this spread. Distinct lineages appear in coastal populations, some small and fox-like, others large and wolfish. Some survived only briefly, isolated on islands, vanishing when resources dwindled. Others endured, adapting to their unique environments, shaping the diversity of ancient dog populations. These were not modern breeds, but they were already distinct, molded by the journeys they undertook. What's striking is that these early dukes often filled roles beyond survival. On islands, they may have served as hunters of seabirds, guards against intruders, or companions on long fishing trips. But in many cases, their remains suggest symbolic value. as well buried carefully placed near dwellings or incorporated into ritual practices. Dogs were not only functional travelers, they were members of the community. This coastal spread also highlights the resilience of the bond. On harsh windswept islands, resources were scarce, survival fragile. Yet even there, humans made space for dogs. That endurance shows that the partnership was no longer tentative. By the time people were sailing across waters, the presence of dogs was expected, even necessary. Think of it, every shoreline touched by humans bore the prints of paws as well. Dogs padded over beaches, curled in huts, barked at waves, crashing in the night. They became part of the rhythm of island life as constant as the tide. The evidence tells us something profound. By this stage, dogs were not just following humans. They were accompanying them, deliberately woven into the very act of migration. To travel meant to bring a dog. To settle meant to include them. And so from coast to coast, island to island, the partnership spread to the edges of the world. Where humans crossed water, dogs crossed too. Not because they had to, but because we chose to bring them, and perhaps because they chose to come. When humans first crossed Beringia into the Americas, more than 15,000 years ago, they brought dogs with them. These proto-dogs became the first canines of the New World, running across plains, guarding camps, and carving out new lives beside their human companions. Their genetic fingerprints still whisper of that journey unique lineages, distinct from both Eurasian wolves and later European dogs. But most of those early lineages are gone now, vanished, as silently as they arrived. Archaeological finds reveal that ancient American dogs were diverse. Some were small and fox-like, adapted to tight spaces and quick movements. Others were larger, wolfish, suited for endurance in hunts or protection in harsh climates. They thrived for thousands of years living with people, from the Arctic tundra to the jungles of Central America. Yet today, almost none of their bloodlines remain. Here's the reality check. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, they did not only bring horses, cattle, and sheep, they also brought their own dogs, mastiffs, hounds herding breeds. Over time, these newcomers mingled with, replaced, or outcompeted the native dogs. Within centuries, the original American lineages faded into near extinction. Modern breeds carry little to none of their DNA. The first American dogs, companions of mammoth hunters, travelers across frozen plains, disappeared almost without a trace. Imagine the sight thousands of years earlier before their vanishing. A hunting party in what is now Alaska sets out across snow, their dogs trotting alongside. The animals sniff the wind, their paws sure on icy ground, their breath rising in the cold. When prey is spotted, the dogs surge forward, helping flush game toward human spears. Later in camp, they curl beside fires, children draping arms across their shaggy bodies. For generations, these scenes repeated across the Americas. And then slowly, the lineage dissolved. Archaeologists find hints of their presence in unexpected places. Dog burials on the Illinois River dating back 10,000 years. Remains in Arctic sites showing dogs used for pulling loads. Bones from Central America suggesting small village dogs, perhaps kept as companions or guardians. Each discovery adds to the story of their diversity, their adaptability, their integration into human lives. And yet, each discovery is also a reminder these dogs no longer exist. Why did they vanish? Some may have been absorbed genetically into European dogs. Others may have been lost as diseases spread with colonization. Still others may have been culled, replaced by foreign breeds, favored by newcomers. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. The first American dogs became ghosts, their heritage surviving only in fragments of ancient DNA. It is haunting to realize that whole lineages can vanish without ceremony. Species come and go across history, but here the loss feels personal. These dogs shared the first human journeys into a new world. They ran beside us when the land bridge still stood, when glaciers still loomed, when mammoths still grazed. They endured with us through millennia, only to fade quietly after European contact. And yet, their story is not entirely lost. Ancient DNA studies have begun to recover their presence, revealing maternal haplotypes distinct from later arrivals. These genetic shadows tell us that the first Americans were not alone. They carried tools that were uniquely theirs, dogs that shaped survival in a new land. Even if their lineages are gone, their story remains. Picture the closing of that chapter. A modern archaeologist kneels in a riverside dig, brushing soil from the bones of a small dog buried thousands of years ago. The skeleton lies curled, as if sleeping its presence, a quiet testimony to a lineage now extinct. In that moment, across centuries, the bond is remembered. The dogs of the Americas may be gone, but their lives mattered. They were companions of the first people who dared to step into a new world. And though their bloodline vanished, their legacy endures in the very fact that humanity was never alone, not even at the edges of the earth. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a group of Arctic hunters pushes across the ice, dogs panting beside sleds loaded with hides and meat. Each animal has proven itself by endurance, not by appearance. Those who could not keep pace never survived. In the snow and silence, dogs became more than helpers. They became part of the rhythm of travel, their bodies and spirits forged by the same cold that shaped their humans. This adaptability is what made dogs unique among domesticated animals. Horses, cattle, sheep, all came later, and most thrived only in certain climates. Dogs alone followed humans everywhere. Their survival was bound not only to our food, but to our movement, our migrations, our needs. They became hunters, guardians, companions, sled pullers, fishing partners. Their diversity was as wide as the human world itself. And through all this adaptation, one trait endured the bond. Whether in a desert village or on an Arctic ice sheet, dogs were not simply tools. They were companions present in art, in burials, in daily life. They adapted not just biologically, but socially, embedding themselves into every rhythm of human existence. Picture one last scene on a windswept island. A fisherman repairs his nets, while a dog lies beside him, its coat salty, its eyes half closed against the sun. On the other side of the world, an Arctic hunter leans on his spear, while dogs curl in the snow, ears twitching at the faint sound of prey. Different lands, different climates, different roles, and yet in both scenes, the bond is the same: humans and dogs enduring together. That adaptability ensured that wherever humans went, they were never alone. Dogs became as global as we did, partners in survival, shaped by every climate, every challenge, every journey. From the very beginning, dogs were hunters, Long before agriculture, before herding or guarding villages, their place was at the chase. The archaeological record shows dogs buried with hunting tools, their bones marked by the lives of animals that ran beside humans in pursuit of prey. Together, human and dog formed a hunting partnership that neither could have achieved alone. Here's the reality check. Humans were skilled hunters, but they lacked the speed nose and stamina of wolves. Wolves, for all their power, lacked the coordination of spear's fire and strategy. Together, though, they bridged the gap. Dogs could flush prey from hiding chase herds into ambushes or track animals across miles of wilderness. Humans could finish the hunt with weapons. Each side gained what the other lacked. Imagine a reindeer hunt across the tundra. Hunters crouch low, signaling silently, their eyes fixed on a distant herd. Alongside them, dogs quiver with anticipation, their ears pricked their noses, twitching in the icy wind. At a signal, the dogs dart forward, scattering the herd. Reindeer bolt, and in the chaos, humans release their spears. The chase is short, brutal, successful. That night, both people and dogs eat. Evidence of this role appears in many places. In the Near East, bones of dogs are found in hunting camps, their teeth showing wear from chewing sinew and bone. In Arctic sites, dogs are linked with caribou hunters, their remains appearing alongside tools of the chase. Even in early farming communities, dogs remained tied to the hunt-pursuing hares, deer, and birds. But beyond the kill itself, dogs offered something else: efficiency. A single dog could track prey that a human might lose. A pair could chase animals into traps. A pack could hold quarry long enough for hunters to arrive. Each success meant more food for the group, and in lean seasons, that could mean the difference between survival and death. Picture another scene: a dense forest at dawn. Hunters creep through undergrowth, their movements cautious, their eyes scanning shadows. At their side, dogs move with fluid grace, silent but alert. Suddenly, a hare darts from cover. The dogs spring faster than any human could be, their chase weaving through brambles. Moments later, they return, the quarry in their jaws. It is not a feast, but it is food, one more victory in the endless struggle to survive. These hunts built more than survival. They built trust. A dog that chased without turning on its human companions, that returned with prey rather than fleeing, was a treasure. Over time, humans began to favor these traits, perhaps feeding more generously the dogs that cooperated best, perhaps sparing the pups that showed promise. Slowly, through countless hunts, the dogs most attuned to humans thrived, and their descendants carried the partnership further. Hunting together was not only practical, it was symbolic. To chase prey side by side forged a bond deeper than scraps or shelter. It created a rhythm of shared risk, shared labor, shared reward. When a dog leapt into the chase, it was not only for itself, it was for the group. And when humans accepted that loyalty, the seed of partnership grew stronger still. So when we think of the earliest roles of dogs, let us remember this: they were hunters at our side, long before they were guardians of flocks or companions by the hearth. They were the silent shadows in the chase, the breath at our heels, the eyes in the dark that looked not at us as prey, but as partners. Once dogs had proven themselves as hunters, another role slowly emerged, one that mattered just as much in the fragile rhythm of Ice Age life guardianship. Long before walls or locked doors, Before villages or watchtowers, dogs became sentinels at the edge of firelight, protectors of camp and kin. Here's the reality check. Humans slept vulnerably. A band of hunters, lying in hides beneath the stars, was easy prey not only for predators like cave lions or hyenas, but for rival groups of humans. Spears and fire offered some defense, but no human could stay awake all night every night. A dog could. Its ears twitched at the faintest rustle its nose caught scents, long before human senses stirred. A growl in the dark was warning enough to rouse the camp before danger struck. Imagine a winter night on the Eurasian steppe. The wind howls the fire gutters low. Families sleep huddled in furs, exhausted from the day's hunt. At the edge of camp, a dog lifts its head, ears pricked. In the distance, shadows move, a pack of wolves or perhaps a rival band. The dog growls softly, the sound carrying through the silence. A hunter stirs, grips his spear, and the camp is awake in time. The threat passes, but the warning saved them. Archaeological evidence supports this role. Dogs appear not only in hunting camps, but in settlements, sometimes positioned near entrances and burials, as though their presence was meant to guard, even in death. Teeth marks on ancient bones suggest they sometimes fought off predators or scavengers near human sites. Their very presence altered the ecology around camps. Large carnivores kept their distance when dogs were near. Guardianship was not only practical, it was emotional. Knowing that a dog lay at the edge of camp gave a sense of safety, a kind of reassurance in the vulnerable hours of night. That feeling, repeated over generations, deepened the bond. Dogs were not just hunters anymore. They were trusted watchmen, silent protectors of the people who fed them. And they guarded more than camps, they guarded kin. Manaburials suggest that children were especially close to dogs. Puppies may have been playmates, but adult dogs too likely watched over the youngest, their instincts aligning with human needs. A child wandering near the fire might be nudged back. A stranger approaching the group might be met with barks or growls. The bond was not abstract. It was woven into daily life, into the safety of families. Picture a different scene dawn in a small riverside camp. The sun just breaking through mist, women grinding seeds, men preparing to hunt. Children tumble in play near the water. A dog watches, ears alert, body tense. When the splash of a crocodile breaks the surface, the dog leaps barking furiously. Adults rush, spears raised. The children pulled back. The threat is driven off, the camp saved. That day the people eat, and they also remember who barked first. This guardianship may have shaped early humans as much as it shaped dogs. With dogs at their side, humans could sleep more deeply, venture further, settle more boldly. Safety allowed for growth. And for dogs, the bond deepened, as those who guarded best were spared, fed, and bred. Over centuries, instinct hardened into role. Dogs became guardians because humans valued it, and because dogs in turn found a place of belonging in the circle of firelight. Guardianship was more than protection from teeth and claws. It was the beginning of loyalty as we know it, an animal standing not apart from humans, but with them, for them. That shift turned survival into partnership, and partnership into trust. As humans shifted from wandering hunters to the first farmers and herders, the role of dogs transformed again. No longer was survival based only on the chase or the warning bark. Now, For the first time, dogs were asked to control, not just to attack prey, but to guide shape and manage the movements of other animals. This was the birth of herding, and it demanded a new kind of intelligence. Here's the reality check. Wolves never herded. They hunted. They pursued prey with precision. They worked in packs with strategy, but their aim was always the kill. Herding required something different. Restraint, anticipation, the ability to influence without destroying. For a dog to learn to circle sheep to block their path without tearing into them was an astonishing leap from the instincts of its ancestors. The archaeological record hints at this transition around 8,000 to 6,000 years ago, as farming spread through the Fertile Crescent and into Europe. Sheep and goats were among the first domesticated livestock, and dogs soon appear in those same sites, their bones buried near early pastures and village edges. These were no longer purely hunting companions. They were working alongside humans in a new way, keeping animals together, guiding them across fields, protecting them from predators without scattering them. Imagine a hillside in the early morning. A flock of sheep grazes, their soft bleats echoing. At the edge, a dog trots back and forth, its eyes sharp and its movements deliberate. When a sheep wanders too far, the dog angles its body just enough to turn it back. No barking, no blood, only control. The herder, standing with staff in hand, watches quietly. Together, human and dog shape the motion of an entire flock, something neither could do alone. This required more than instinct. It required a rewiring of behavior. Some dogs, perhaps those with the keenest ability to anticipate movement, were favored, rewarded, and bred. Over generations, their descendants became masters of this strange task. They learned to guide rather than chase, to control rather than kill. It is one of the most remarkable shifts in the history of domestication, from predator to protector of prey. The significance of herding went beyond the animals themselves. It reshaped human society. Farming communities could manage larger flocks because dogs could help contain them. This meant more food, more security, more stability. In turn, societies grew. Villages became towns, towns became cities. And at the edges of those fields, dogs trotted tirelessly, guardians of order in a changing world. Think of the trust this role demanded. A herder had to rely on a dog not to slaughter the flock, not to scatter it in chaos, but to work with patience and control. That reliance speaks to the depth of the bond. A dog was no longer only a tool of survival, it had become an extension of human will, a partner in shaping the land itself. Even today, herding dogs carry the legacy of those ancient fields. Their eyes lock onto sheep with an intensity that echoes back thousands of years. Their movements trace the same patterns carved in the dawn of agriculture. They are not taught from nothing. They inherit a memory written in their lineage, the intelligence of ancestors who first bent their instincts to serve this new role. From the hunt to the hearth, from the warning growl to the guiding gaze, dogs adapted at every step. Herding was not just another role. It was proof of how far they had come, how deeply they had entwined with us. By the time herding had taken root, dogs had already proven themselves as hunters, guardians, and workers. Yet something deeper was happening beneath those roles, something that bones and tools alone can only hint at. Dogs were becoming companions. For the first time in human history, another species was not just tolerated, not just useful, but welcomed into the emotional circle of human life. Here's the reality check. Humans did not bury cattle with ochre, did not carve foxes into ritual amulets, did not paint hyenas curled at their feet. Only dogs. The evidence is overwhelming. Carefully buried skeletons, graves where dogs rest beside children, art that depicts them not as prey, but as partners. These gestures tell us that dogs had crossed a boundary no other animal had breached. They had become part of us. Imagine a small farming village 7,000 years ago. The fields stretch green with early wheat sheep graze on the hillside, and in the heart of the settlement, a child runs barefoot. At her side bounds a dog tail, ears pricked the two, moving in rhythm. The dog is not pulling a sled or guarding a flock. It is simply there running for the joy of it, running with her. In that moment, the bond is not about survival. It is about companionship. This companionship was not born overnight. It grew from countless acts, the sharing of scraps, the tending of wounds, the burial of animals with care. Slowly, dogs earned a place not only as tools of survival, but as trusted presences, and humans in turn came to see them as something more than beasts. The relationship had transformed. Archaeology shows this transformation in subtle ways. Some dog burials contain grave goods collars of shell pigments, of ochre objects placed as if honoring the animal's spirit. In art, dogs appear not only in hunting scenes, but in domestic ones curled near hearths, walking beside figures sitting at thresholds. These depictions suggest a shift in perception. Dogs were no longer just guardians of the night or helpers in the field. They were companions of the hearth, woven into the rhythm of daily human life. And beyond the artifacts, there is the undeniable echo of emotion. To care for an animal, too sick to hunt, to bury it with ritual pigment, to carve its likeness into stone, these are acts of feeling. Even without our words, those ancient people were expressing something we still recognize: affection, respect, love. Think of one last scene before we close this chapter. A grave uncovered in Western Europe, 14,000 years old. A human lies wrapped in ochre, their hands folded. Beside them, a dog has placed its head resting near the human's arm. Thousands of years later, the soil is brushed away, the bones revealed. And though the people who buried them are gone, the gesture is still clear. They chose to bury dog and human together side by side, as if to say, even in death, this bond endures. That gesture speaks across millennia. It tells us that dogs had already become more than survival partners. They had become companions, companions worth remembering, companions worth grieving. In those ancient burials lies the first evidence of what we feel today when a dog lays its head in our lap, or waits at the door, or curls at our feet. The continuity is unbroken. By the end of the Stone Age, dogs were no longer on the margins of human life. They were in its center, hunters, guardians, herders, and companions, bound to us in ways no other species has ever matched. And so from wolves in the firelight to dogs at our side, the journey reached its turning point. We had changed them, and they had changed us. And together we stepped into history no longer alone. We have wandered far tonight, through caves and camps, across land bridges and islands, beside fires that flickered thousands of years ago. Along the way, we followed wolves who lingered at the edges of our lives, who learned patience where once there was only hunger, who stepped closer, generation by generation, until they became something new. Here's the reality check. You probably wouldn't last a week in their world. Ice Age winters, cut to the bone prey vanished. Into the dark survival was never certain. And yet, in that harshness, a bond began to grow. Wolves who dared to wait at the campfire edge lived longer. Humans who spared them gained guardians, hunters, and warning voices in the night. What began as survival turned slowly into companionship. The bones tell us the story, healed injuries that show care, burials dusted with red ochre where dogs lay beside humans, graves where a woman's hand rests forever on a puppy. These gestures whisper of affection long before words, like pet or loyalty existed. And as humans spread across the world, dogs padded beside this of them into the Americas, across islands, over deserts, through tundra. Wherever we went, they went too. Over time, roles multiplied. Dogs hunted at our side, guarded our children, herded our flocks. But beyond all that, they became companions, creatures welcomed not only into our camps, but into our hearts. And though their ghost wolf ancestors are gone, their spirit lives on in every wagging tail and watchful eye. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember you are not alone. For tens of thousands of years, neither were we. In every firelit camp and every silent night, there was the breath of another beside us, the dog partner in survival companion, in life and reminder that even in the harshest times, bonds can grow.